Hello and welcome to the Astrobit podcast, brought to you by your home for curated space news, astrobitica.com. I'm your host, Alan, and this is the next episode of Astro Wife Asks. In this segment, my lovely wife, Raylene,
hi, everybody,
asks me about an astrophysical, astronomical, or space-related subject she's curious about, and I do my best to explain it. It is a fun way to dive into the wonders of the cosmos while keeping things approachable and conversational. So, without further ado, Astro Wife, what are we going to ask about today?
So today I would like to ask the question of, are we alone in the universe?
Okay, fun one today. This is a thing that when you are an astronomer or you have some kind of degree in astrophysics or space or something like that, this is always the question that comes up. It's like one of the first things people ask, like, do you believe in aliens? Do you think we're alone in the universe? So this is a fun one. I'm going to try to keep this based in reality, based in science, without getting too theoretical. But yeah, there's some fun answers to this question.
So primarily, because this is a very common question that people ask, I think my first question would be, why do people wonder if we are alone in the universe?
I think because we've been looking up at the stars, for centuries, right? And as far as we know, we haven't encountered anyone or anything outside the Earth, but we know the universe is massively expansive, right? We know the galaxy is enormous. It has billions and billions of stars and potentially billions and billions of planets. We know there are billions and billions of other galaxies. It just seems like there's so much out there. There's so much space. There's so many stars. There's so many planets. I think the question just becomes inevitable. Like, if we live here on this planet around this star, there must be something else around some other star out there somewhere in the universe.
Who is it that said that we are either alone in the universe or we are not? Both ideas are equally terrifying.
Yeah, that was famed science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke.
But I think that premise holds equally true, because can you imagine if we end up discovering that we are alone in the universe, and then it's like this solitary planet with these billions of other galaxies and it's just us? That seems very far-fetched, but
yeah, it does, because, and here's why we'll get into the science of it, right? It does seem far-fetched because when we look at life here on Earth, right, we look at everything from single-celled microorganisms all the way up to super complex organisms like me and you and whales and trees and all this other stuff. When we look at all types of life on Earth, we are made up of essentially 4 different elements, mostly, right? There's hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, and oxygen, right? And we all have different levels and different compositions and different amounts of each one of those. But that's essentially what life is made up here on Earth. But when we take a telescope and we point it to anywhere in the sky, right? And we look at just anything in space, whether it be a galaxy, a star, a planet, a nebula, a dust cloud, a moon, an asteroid, we see those 4 elements in abundance everywhere. We see hydrogen and nitrogen and oxygen and carbon everywhere. If you add helium, those are the most common elements in the universe. So we know the elements that make life here on Earth exist everywhere in the universe and in abundance as well. It's not like they're rare elements, right? If life on Earth was made of some rare element that we only found here on Earth, and everywhere we looked out there in the universe, we never saw this other element, then it might be conceivable to say, hey, we are special, we are unique, we're the only ones. But that's not the case. We see the elements that make life here on Earth absolutely everywhere.
And like we discussed in the exoplanet episode, we keep looking for other planets that are very similar to Earth, and I guess the probability of us finding life on those planets increases the more we find.
Yeah, so we talked about the elements. Now we have to look at the conditions. What are the conditions that allow life to exist? Here on Earth, the conditions are that a planet is around a star that's relatively stable, right? It's not a star that's very unstable and blasting the planet with radiation. It is close enough to that star that it has liquid water, so it's warm enough to have liquid water, but it's not so far off to be frozen, but not so close that it boils the water off, right? So it's in that Goldilocks zone where it's not too hot, not too cold. And it has to be like a terrestrial planet, right? It has to be made of rock, not like gas. And we look around. Again, we find terrestrial planets that are in their Goldilocks zone of their star, and they have relatively stable stars, again, everywhere. So the conditions that make life seem to exist everywhere. The elements that make life are absolutely everywhere. So it makes sense to logically deduce that the probability that there is something else out there living is high.
Have human beings ever found signs of alien life anywhere yet?
So not quite. We did find what are called organic molecules. Okay, organic molecules are just when other elements are combined with carbon, right? Now, again, that forms the basis for life, right? But we found organic molecules or organic compounds on Mars, on the moon. We recently found them on an asteroid. NASA did an asteroid return mission where it landed a probe on an asteroid, gathered some samples, and then came back to Earth. And we analyzed that dust and rocks that it collected, and we found organic compounds there. So it's the closest thing so far. Now, organic compounds doesn't mean it's biological, right? It doesn't mean there's anything living on there. It is just essentially like the building blocks of life. We found those, like I said, on Mars, asteroids, the moon, everywhere.
I heard about something called the Fermi Paradox as well, related to extraterrestrial life. What is that?
Okay, so before you start with the Fermi Paradox, we have to back it up one level, and we have to talk about the Drake equation, right? So there was this physicist called Francis Drake, or Sir Francis Drake, and he came up with this really long formula, right? And if you want to look it up, you can Google it. There's like 30 different variables inside this formula. But essentially, Drake said, look, if we count the number of stars that are in the universe and then take a percentage of those stars that have terrestrial planets around it, and then a percentage of those terrestrial planets that might be in the habitable zone, and a percentage of those planets that might have liquid water, and a percentage of those planets where the elements and conditions for life exist, so on and so forth, right? You go take a percentage of this and a percentage of that, and the number keeps getting smaller. But Drake says that at the end of that equation, that should equal at least like 10 million civilizations, advanced intelligent civilizations in our galaxy alone, right? Not to mention the billions of other galaxies that we know about. So Drake came up with this equation that said there should be 10 million civilizations. Well, Enrique Fermi, who came along a little bit later, just kind of in a passing comment about the Drake equation, well, if that's true, then where is everyone? Right? That is the Fermi paradox. If what Drake has said is true, and there should be 10 million advanced, intelligent alien civilizations in our galaxy, where is everyone? How come we haven't made contact with anyone? And people love to speculate on solutions for the Fermi paradox, right? There are all different types, right? Maybe one solution to the Fermi paradox is maybe we're the first. Maybe the universe is only 13 billion years old. It's going to exist for at least a couple hundred billion, if not trillions of years. Maybe we just arrived very early on the scene relatively, and more aliens will spawn life later. Another solution to the Fermi paradox is maybe they're just too far away, right? And we just can't communicate effectively because they're in another galaxy, or they're several hundred galaxies away, millions of light years away, right? It would be essentially impossible to communicate with those. Other examples for solutions to the Fermi paradox is the great filter theory, where maybe intelligent life exists, but before it gets too advanced, something wipes it out, right? Either like massive asteroid strike, or their sun explodes, or they wipe themselves out with nuclear weapons, or they have some kind of disease that wipes them out. So there's this theory that maybe there's just a filter out there that only a small percentage of species make it through.
Or like in Star Trek, they don't make contact with civilizations unless they've reached a certain level of development. So maybe they could be avoiding us, or even just observing us until we reach that level of development.
Yeah, Star Trek calls it the prime directive. Like, they're not allowed to make contact until they develop warp speed. That kind of plays into what's called the zoo hypothesis, which is another solution to the Fermi paradox, that There are tons of species out there. They're way more advanced than we are, and they know it, so they don't want to interfere with us, and they're just kind of keeping their distance and watching us from afar, right? Because we are not smart enough to be able to detect him. So there are all types of solutions to the Fermi Paradox, but essentially that it's trying to answer, if there is aliens everywhere, then why haven't we made contact yet?
I think the probability of aliens being somewhere out there is probably very high, but it remains to be seen whether we make contact with them at all or not.
Yeah, one thing to include on that is there could be species out there that have been long gone for millions of years, right? The universe is 13.8 billion years old, right? And it is billions of light years across. There could have been an alien species, even something like the dinosaurs, right? Not intelligent civilization types, but they could have existed on a planet 10 million years ago and been completely wiped out for millions and millions of years, and we would never know, right? One thing that gives me hope is because of the dinosaurs, right? Life is so resilient that it evolved here on Earth at least twice independently, right? The dinosaurs came along, ruled the earth, ready, for tens of millions of years, right? Completely unlike anything we have on earth today, really. And they were completely wiped out. Like 99% of all living things were wiped out when the asteroid hit the earth and wiped out the dinosaurs. Yet life found a way. Life came back. And now here we are, developing civilizations, technology, traveling to other bodies in the solar system. So that gives me hope that as long as the elements are there and as long as the conditions are right, life is pretty resilient. It finds a way to make things happen. And, dinosaurs are as close to alien as you can get on this planet. And if they existed here, that means something like that might exist somewhere else. Okay, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Astrobit Podcast and this episode of Astro Wife Asks. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and maybe learned something new along the way. If you want to explore more curated space news, don't forget to check out astrobitica.com and follow us for updates on future episodes. Until next time, keep looking up and stay curious.
Bye, everybody.